Tonight, focus on human rights as we kick off a focus on human rights this month. And the CEO of the Human Rights Commission, Advocate Tseliso, joins me tonight to make me understand what the Human Rights Commission has been busy with and what they're going to be busy with this month to mark the human rights issue. I'm always wondering whether we have had a culture of human rights taking root, or is it still something that people just don't prioritize? So we hope to be educated around the table tonight. Advocate, thank you so much for joining.
Good evening to you and to your viewers.
Man, you know, one of our reporters was assaulted, you know, there in Cape Town as that crisis festers. And of course, Chris Nissen has always been on the front lines of that from the Human Rights Commission to try and, you know, better that situation. But it's one example I want to start with that may suggest that the human rights culture hasn't taken root as much as it should. Here are a group of people who have been in a church since October. You know, October, November, December, January, it's now March. It's almost half a year, you know, in the middle of a big city like Cape Town. What is your own assessment of what that means for the human rights? Because part of the human rights culture must be to take care of the most vulnerable, whether it be them asylum seekers, refugees, children, women, and so on. And here it seems like when you look at it from another angle, that we seem to have failed those people if they were sitting in a situation that was so unhealthy for 6 months.
Yeah, no, certainly. I mean, I would first like to also convey the regret which was expressed by my commission about the assault of your colleague. That's really unfortunate, especially coming from, you know, those who have been deployed to promote and protect human rights. Certainly, secondly, you know, our constitution is very clear. You know, we have to work towards the establishment of a culture of human rights, taking into account our terrible past of human rights violations. And what we are seeing, you know, clearly highlights the challenges, you know, which, you know, still confront us as a country, as institutions, as a people, to really work hard to ensure that, you know, we do get to those ideals. So it's still a long road, a long struggle for human rights culture, and clearly what is happening, you know, highlights many of the challenges. You know, the clip you showed about the rubbish in Alexander, the fact that, you know, refugees have been in Cape Town and Pretoria for so many months.
Yes.
At a global level, I'm told there are over 70 million people who are forced to leave their countries. In our country, we have roughly about 200,000 refugees, and about 250 asylum seekers. So it is a lot. And of course, we have to ensure that as a country, as an institution, that the human rights provisions in our constitution are really adhered to.
Yeah. But the Cape Town situation seems to suggest that we don't seem to be geared to deal with a crisis involving refugees. I mean, earlier on I had a minister, the Deputy Minister of Social Development, giving an explanation which one can call a bureaucratic explanation. Right? This must have a paper to show that they are refugees and what. We've got people in the middle of a city, right? Others sleeping outside in the pavements for 6 months. And between the Human Rights Commission and the Home Affairs and the City of Cape Town and the province, are you telling me that we have done our best over 6 months to try and to deal with, you know, understand if the situation, you know, continued for 3 or 4 weeks while we are still trying to figure out. But 6 months seems to suggest that our human rights instruments, you know, are failing us. Right? If you look at the situation in the Mamelodi Church, it's even worse, because here you have the situation where there was a human tragedy, you know, force of nature, floods, right? And even there, you got a disaster management situation that did not respond adequately. You had politicians making promises that these people will be relocated before Christmas. It's March, and those people are still stuck in a church with 2 toilets. I mean, this can't be, and you know, you have to convince me that the Human Rights Commission did all it can to avoid that situation festering. Or are we waiting for people to die first, and then we'll run, and then there will be all sorts of ambulances rushing there. But when the thing is festering in front of us, there seems to be very few voices that are condemning that situation and reversing it.
Yeah. No, certainly, JJ, the situation has not been handled properly at all, by those who are responsible. We as a commission have been there since the beginning. Our own commissioner, Nissen, was actually assaulted.
Yes, I remember. Along with the Archbishop and other people.
Trying to protect, the Archbishop from being assaulted. And we have tried. I mean, we've been negotiating with both sides. So certainly, there have been challenges on both sides. There are certainly some aspects, some elements in the refugee community who are abusing the situation. But at the same time, I don't think the police and other state agencies really handle this thing with the agencies required. And we have been nudging them. Clearly it's something which we all need to look into to see exactly how, in line with the values of our Constitution, protect the most vulnerable people. There are children who are also affected there. Some of them have not even gone to school. So clearly it's not a very good start for the Human Rights Month. That we have to acknowledge.
Yeah. But does it mean that you feel helpless because you're supposed to be a Chapter 9 institution with some teeth, right? In other words, if government doesn't do its job, which clearly on both of these seems that there's a big question mark about whether they did what they can, right? At all levels, if you look at this one situation, it's whether the province, I mean, the city is in a shambles with no mayor and what have you. The province, seems to have been sort of, they've left those people in a lurch despite the premier promising all sorts of things. We had a head of disaster management here who, did not blink before saying that the situation is not that bad. So you have a situation where almost like a tone-deaf setup. If you just look at the example of Mamelodi, surely the human rights can't just lament on the sidelines. Yeah. Doesn't the Constitution empower you to do something?
Well, it does. We're not lamenting. Remember what happened in this case. These people actually were given refuge by the church itself. And the church was not really eager, to take urgent measures. At the same time, the city itself. So basically, there's an element of paralysis, I must say, on both sides. And since we were negotiating, we didn't use all the other powers which we have because we're trying to find a much more amicable solution. And unfortunately, it took this long. So clearly, this is not our best intervention as far as, quick responses. But we've been negotiating. The fact that, there has been some resolution is because of our involvement. Even in Pretoria, we've been involved. We're speaking to the Office of the High Commissioner for Refugees, government, the police. It's been a very, very long, protracted struggle. But I think lessons have been learned on both sides, and surely we should not have another situation like this, which takes this long. Yeah.
Now, one of the criticisms of our situation now is that there seems to have been a skewed focus, right, on what is called first-generation rights, as opposed to, second-generation rights, right? And in this particular case, we are talking about, it points to second-generation rights. That, if it was you had two cases that come to mind where people were in court because they were irritated by something that somebody said. So, the AfriForum put up a flag on Twitter, and then there was a court case. The whole Mandela Foundation was in court to try and stop this guy.
And the Human Rights Commission.
Yeah, both of you. I'm coming to both of you.
Okay.
You've gone to court because somebody put up a flag. You have not gone to court to make sure the government doesn't let people to sit in a church for 6 months, or to sit in a flood-ridden place, or running away from the floods.
Yeah.
So it would not be, therefore, unreasonable to then say, even somebody like Human Rights Commission, somebody like Mandela Foundation, who are always in the forefront of trying to stand in the gap, right, for those who are vulnerable, haven't seen it fit, right, with something that is an unfolding human tragedy, to go to court and say to the Gauteng government, you shall make sure those people have toilet. I'm not talking about the complicated luxury. I'm talking about just those people are bathing in a toilet in a church with 2 basins, and there are 200 of them, right? You haven't gone to court to do that, to stop that situation. You are negotiating on the sidelines, etc. But you are in court, either blink of an eye, with somebody who puts a South African flag, an old South African flag. Can you please make me understand?
Well, I mean,
the imbalance with that setup.
Yeah, you know, the human rights struggle, unfortunately, has largely tended to be more biased towards civil and political rights. We're one of the few countries in the world which actually have judicially enforceable socioeconomic rights, and we do go to court, you know, several times. But, you know, I really want to distinguish the issue of the refugees from our normal work around socioeconomic rights. We do go to court on socioeconomic rights issues from time to time.
Yes.
You know, we have a mandate to monitor socioeconomic rights, and we do that. But, you know, just for clarity, the Cape Town situation is very, very different. If you recall, these people basically wanted to be sent to Canada.
To another country,
as a group, and that is impossible. And then they didn't want to move at all. So, you know, we couldn't use force to remove them. We're trying to negotiate. And therefore, they were staying in the church, refusing to move from the church, and hence, you know, they had to sleep there and bath there. It's not really that they were forced to be there. They didn't want to move. That's why, actually, at the end, there was a court order which actually compelled the police to remove them from the church. So it's a slightly different situation. But you're correct. That, you know, if you look at our challenges in our country, we have huge socioeconomic rights challenges. Poverty, unemployment, the rubbish we saw in the clip today, challenges around health and stuff like that. So yes, I would be the first one to say that, you know, we could do a lot more as a Human Rights Commission in addressing issues of socioeconomic rights. But remember, we are not the first line of defense. That is the responsibility of government. Our role is to ensure that government does its work. But certainly, I would not say we should get an A for our work around socioeconomic rights.
You're not getting an A.
We're trying. We're trying.
And you're not addressing the Mamelodi thing. Maybe it was not on your radar.
We address many things. We have a hearing in Alexander, you know.
Yeah, where the MEC told you to get lost, and you have not done anything about that. But we'll come to that now. I'm going to talk some more to the CEO of the Human Rights Commission about, as we launch our focus on human rights this month, because on the 21st of March is Human Rights Day, it used to be called Sharpeville Day, but putting a spotlight on how we respond to issues of human rights. Let's take a break now. The human rights focus around the table tonight with the CEO of the Human Rights Commission. He's saying they are not getting an A. I don't know whether they're getting a matric pass or in the university what you used to call Madoda score. You know, when you just pass.
No, we are above Madoda.
Are you above? But not a distinction, clearly.
Yeah, of course. But
what are your constraints? What are your constraints? Do you feel constrained? Because you see, the establishment of the Human Rights Commission was precisely to follow on having what is hailed as the best constitution around the world, you know. but it will be best only when it's implemented and people feel that they can run to it to find refuge in its provisions, particularly when it comes to things that, shelter over their heads, hunger, and diseases, etc., etc. So my question then is, if you are not getting an A, what are your constraints?
Yeah. Let me start by saying, we actually have one of the most powerful mandates with sufficient powers. We have powers to subpoena, we can take people to court and stuff like that. So at least from the legal framework, I mean, we're quite fine.
Yeah.
The challenge really is that, we're a very small organization. Our budget is only small, about 200 million rands a year. Compared to the police, we're sitting on 90 billion rands a year. Sure. And I only have 175 staff members to address a population of 57 million. Yeah. We get about 10,000 complaints a year. We have to be at every corner in this country. Yeah. So clearly, we're a very small organization trying to do the best with what we have. And from the little that we have, we're definitely a highly respected organization globally. But of course, we are dealing with massive challenges. Yeah. But secondly, the other constraint is that there's still a reluctance by the state, to do its work as far as socioeconomic rights are concerned, whether it's health, whether it's education. Of course, the state might also hide behind the fact that, the economy is not doing so well, and there is a massive backlog which has to be addressed. Yeah. Parliament itself, which holds the executive to account, is also not doing well to make sure that, those who are meant to do their job are doing so. So, that's really where we are. But I think, my colleagues in the Human Rights Commission are really doing their best. Of course, we could always do better.
Are you stretched? Is that what you're saying?
We're very, very stretched. Very, very stretched. I mean, as I'm saying, look at a budget of 200 million rands and a staff members of 175. And you compare us with any other state institutions with a comparable size and budget, we are doing way ahead.
Yeah, but if you argued for a bigger budget and your line ministry.
We are always trying. Take IPID, for example. IPID only focus on police misconduct. Yeah. Their budget is bigger than ours. Public Protect only focus on the state issues. We look at both public and private. And yet we have the biggest mandate with the smallest budget and smallest resources. But, we try to make the best of what we have. And that's why, despite all the challenges, people still come to us, 10,000 complaints in a year. And we're working quite hard. I think we are involved in human rights issues every day. Yeah. Chris Nissen has been in that church for the last 3 months. We're also involved in Pretoria. We have hearings, we take government to court on socioeconomic rights issues. We subpoenaed, if you recall, the MEC for Health in KZN over oncology. Yes. We subpoenaed Home Affairs recently about their slow pace in processing applications. If people were to look at our reports, I would say we're doing pretty well. Yeah. For the size.
For the size. What about the cooperation with other similarly mandated institutions like the public protector you just mentioned? Right? Is there danger of overlap there? Is there an MOU with them to pass certain cases to them and vice versa?
Well, yes, we do work together. We refer matters to them where we feel they're in a better position to deal with those matters. But there are massive overlaps, so we have to also be very careful as to what we can take in view of our resources. And those matters which we feel we are best in a position to deal with, we'll deal with them. So issues of socioeconomic rights, for example. And unfortunately, as we were pointing out, that we've also, for quite a long time, tried to focus a lot on issues around racism, especially, obvious racial practices, in view of our country history. So we've actually tried to, root out those as fast as possible. The case of taking a few matters to court around the K word and also issues around hate speech. But certainly we need to put a lot more effort around issues of socioeconomic rights.